Ew. Smells like it's time for another Shy Life podcast.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3. Good luck, studio.
Oh, it's the Shy Life podcast.
Oh, there's gonna be some drama ahead.
All I wanted was a pie, and then I hatched out of an egg.
Okay, bring the mic over. He's ready to record.
Hello.
It's the quiet ones you've got to watch, you know.
Is it metaphorical? Is it deep? Is it deep?
Good boy. He's not all that shy is right.
Blimey, Governor. It's the Shy Life podcast.
Hello, Paul.
629. Excellent.
629.
629. Bonjour et bienvenue au podcast Shy Life.
Hello and welcome to yet another episode of the Shy Life podcast with Paul the Shy Yeti. How are you doing? I'm all right. So, what's this episode going to be about? Well, it's an exciting one because it sees the return of my birthday twin, Andy. Yes, you remember, he was here talking about Australian soaps of the 70s and 80s last time. Yes, we were born on the very same day. He's slightly older than me. I think you can tell, you know. It makes a big difference, those 2 hours. I'm teasing. No, we are almost exactly the same age. But he is just those 2 or 3 hours older. So he gets to boss me around because he's like the older dominant twin. I guess I'll do whatever you say, Andy, I promise. No, it's not like that at all. It's very nice. It's very nice to have a birthday twin. Anyway, so what are we going to talk about this time? Well, let's start the episode and I'll tell you, and he'll be arriving any minute now. Okay, let's run that theme music.
Darling, it's the Shy Life podcast.
Good, but it's a positive thing, Paul. The high life, the shy life.
You won't find a cast of characters like this everywhere.
I'll go anywhere but Toto.
Delicious.
Hello, captors. How are you? You quite like a big bang, don't you?
Go Shy Yeti.
Oh, I hope he hasn't found out my secret. Maybe he has.
I love the Yeti. Yes, it's my favorite thing.
If you thought that was bad, just listen to this.
Yeah, I am strangely drawn to Yeti Uncle John's ankles as well.
That has the Shy Life podcast though, Dan. I don't think so.
Has anyone seen my hot sausage?
It's all gooey and meaty and yum.
Oh, I can't wait for it to begin.
It's the Shy Life podcast.
I like that. Yeah.
Marvellous, Paul.
Hi there.
So, yes, this time we may be talking about those Aussie soaps we love so much again, but I said to him last time we recorded, I'd really like to ask him the sort of questions I often ask a new guest, you know, favourite this, favourite that, because, you know, we've talked about the fact that we're born the same day. We've talked about the Aussie shows we like, you know, on this show and also in our messages. But there are lots of things I don't know about him and probably lots of things he doesn't know about me. So I like to ask him some questions. I'd like to see if there are any other similarities because, you know, we definitely have some similarities in our interests. So although he is a dog person and I'm a cat person, so that's a difference. Although we do take our tea very similar. Yes. Paul, it must be very strange having a birthday twin. Yes, Yeti Uncle John, it is. Yeah. I was going to ask you a question. I have a theory. Okay. Yeah. So you and Andy are born the same day. Yes, same day, same year. All right. So is there any possibility, right? Any possibility of what? Well, is there any possibility that you are the same person? Is there any possibility I'm the same person? No, we're not the same person. We are totally different people. There wasn't just one person born on our birthday. It's possible that he was born where he was born and I was born where I was born, just on the same day. Oh, well, but he was on lookout. He went out first. You just followed whimpering and moaning like a baby. What? I was a baby. He was a baby too. And I don't think he was on the lookout because he didn't know about me and I didn't know about him. You do say the strangest things sometimes, did you, Uncle John? Oh, so he's not the same person. I mean, you're not the same person. No, Andy and I are two separate people, believe it or not. All right, well, he's here. Okay, he's here. If he's here, then you know that he is a separate Yet, Uncle John, you baffle me sometimes. I'm sorry, it's just a theory, I just wondered. Thought you could be clones of one another. That would explain why there's two of you, just so you're the same person. Oh, right. Well, it sounds like very scientific research you've done. Yes. Oh, listeners, Andy's here, so we're going to talk to him now. And thankfully, yes, Uncle John will be doing something else, won't you? Oh, I will. I'll be listening quietly. Very quietly. So quietly we don't even know you're there. Yes, Paul. Okay, let's talk to Andy. Andy, hello. You're back.
Hi, Paul. I'm back again for another dose.
I know. She didn't put you off.
Not at all, no.
And this time we're going to have a range of subjects. We're going to find out a bit more about you and me and any similarities we might have. Other than we already know we both like Australian soaps from the 70s and 80s,
Yep.
But there are other things I don't know. So, but I do know that we agree on strength of tea for a start.
Definitely.
Quite strong.
In fact, I'm sat here with a cup of tea now. It's Co-op 99 tea.
Yeah.
Because I'm a great believer that I think if you keep having the same tea over and over and over, it gets it loses the flavour a bit. And I think every couple of boxes you should maybe change brand.
Yeah.
That's why there's so many different brands of tea. So I was on Yorkshire tea, but I've now gone to Co-op 99, and I've actually left the bag in the cup.
Oh yeah, I do that sometimes. That's a medium size. Is that a medium sized cup? Do you have?
It's just a medium sized cup because I find if the cup's too big, the tea bags aren't. There's not enough tea to keep the strength.
Do you have a double?
Leave the bag in.
Do you have a double tea bag? I do.
Yeah. I've got to. If I'm in a really long meeting or I just can't be bothered to go back to the kitchen and make another drink, sometimes I do have a bigger mug and I have put 2 tea bags in. Yeah. I must confess that.
Yeah, I've done that too. So, this is important stuff, listeners.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about this, Paul. I'm not really a big fan on astrology, but I have read stuff over the years, and there is this theory, isn't there, that I know we weren't born in the same town, but the fact that we were born within is it 2-3 hours of each other?
Yeah, I'm 10 p.m. and I'm
7 p.m. just before 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Astrology seems to think that, and really when you look at the scale of the planet Earth, we weren't really that far apart, were we? Maybe 100 miles or so. So the kind of astrological precept is that we should be quite similar. Yeah, because Saturn was in the same place as Venus or whatever. Notice I chose those 2 planets.
I think. Well, we get on for a start, so we both have a sense of humour. I think so. Maybe we're scraping at sort of things, but I think that's why I'm kind of interested in know what. Because you're definitely more of a dog person. I'm more of a cat person, so that's a difference. But when I get to know a dog, I like a dog. It's sometimes I've had a few bad experiences being a paper boy. You see, that was the problem. But once I've met dogs and I got to know them, then they're absolutely fine.
I was going to say, I know something that people that pretend to prefer cats have always said to me is that they prefer maybe the independence of the cat and the fact that the cat isn't constantly demanding. And in some ways, dogs can be quite like small children. Not that I've ever had small children, but they're constantly wanting attention and constantly wanting to be around you. Whereas with a cat, you can let them do their own thing a bit more, and they're a bit more. They'll clear off, and you won't see them for a few hours. And the bit that always makes me laugh most of all is when you go on Facebook and people all have, look at this poor cat. This poor cat is in my garden. It's been abandoned. It's so lost. And you think, it's not lost. It's playing you. It knows what you've got. It's after some food. It's from down the road, and you're like the third person today it's done it to. So,
or if it is like, we live. My parents live in a village, and I'm recording from their house. We've had strays come, and like sometimes an owner has died or moved or whatever, and the cat, for whatever reason, didn't go with them. And it'll find a new home for itself. It'll go from garden to garden. So they're quite sort of. They're probably auditioning us. They're like, so what's this one like? No, don't worry.
That's spot on.
They know a lot more than we think they do. I think my cat Dealey has a few doggy traits as well. So like when the postman comes and the post comes through, I always say he goes to the front door to see what's going on, because he's very much, if he was a person, he'd be a foreman. He'd be like when we have had builders in the flat, he kind of comes and has a look and see what's going on. And I mean, you've even seen him sort of stick his head in the toolbox, and I've had to apologise. I'm so sorry, my cat's just making sure you're okay.
So convention says postman's at the door with your parcel, or maybe it's the Amazon person.
Yeah.
Cat shouldn't have any interest at all, and will probably just turn away and have a quick look and then think, oh, right, something more interesting out in the other room. A dog should be kind of thundering down the stairs. Who's this person? Who's this person? Maybe barking, territorial. Who's this invader? And might be quite savage towards, or quite aggressive, or barking. And is that the conventional thinking?
That's what I think people think. No,
my dog is like the most. Someone's at the. In fact, we all often said, if people did just walk in, she'd be just saying, oh, come here and pet me. Come here and pet me. She's just not interested.
Well, I would say Dealey goes to the door, checks if there's any mail for him, and if there isn't, then he'll just walk away. He's not doggy enough that he'd pick it up or bring it. He's just checking to make sure there's nothing for him. He's very self-centered. But he has got, because he's 18 and a half now, and he did have like a health thing during the pandemic where we had to get a cat ambulance to come and take him away and sort him out, and I think he's being very much more sort of suffering from anxiety since then. Doesn't like to be separated from us, so he doesn't really like it at night time. Even though he could walk in my bedroom and sleep on my bed, he doesn't really want to do that. He wants to get in the rooms where the doors are closed, or so he makes sort of more.
Do you get that thing with the kind of the paw scratching on the door?
Well, he sort of makes noises. He sort of makes wailing noises, and I mean, it might be slight cat dementia. But I mean, he's fine when you're with him, and we have lots of nice cuddles, and he watches Sons and Daughters with me, and if I'm playing Fortnite, you can see he's watching the things moving on the screen and stuff. So he's still got a good quality of life, but he's always been a house cat, so his life has always been more towards whoever's lived in the house.
So that, for me, that's one of the reasons why I'm a dog person, because I'm terrified that my pet would run out and something awful would happen, because I'm stupid. I know what I'm like. I don't always look when I'm crossing the road, and I can just see the worst, 10-ton juggernaut thundering down the road. Oh, hi. I would be that person that would be run over. So that's kind of why I think I prefer dogs, because I think it doesn't, I'm kind of think having a dog in the house is fine. I think if I had a cat and it wanted to go out, I'd feel a bit torn between, can I let it out? Is it safe? That kind of thing.
I'm not exactly on a busy road, but I'm at my flat. I'm by a railway station that's a sort of smallish country one, but there's still cars coming in, and it's a very crowded car park. There's not much room for cars. If you're not careful, they're backing into each other and that sort of thing. I wouldn't have been happy with him. He can go. I have a little yard in the front of my flat, and he can go out into the yard but I would always go with him and wander around the yard with him rather than letting him just letting him go out and then go back into the house. I keep a watchful eye on him, but
and I really don't have a problem with my dog on the lead. She's on that lead. She's safe. I can stop her. I can keep that control. That to me feels why I think I prefer dogs, because I think they're looking to you for that security, and you've got that security with them. Whereas I feel with a cat, maybe that independence scares me a little bit.
Yeah. Going back to TV, other than Australian shows that we know we like, what would you say are other TV shows that you always tune in for, or the sort of TV shows you'd watch?
Oh gosh, well, I've just been watching a documentary. I love factual documentaries. I like to see true crime, mysteries, things that have really happened where maybe they didn't know the answer and then years later it was all resolved because the DNA test came through. Yeah. I'm not keen on crime fiction, though. I find that's a little bit, there's enough bad stuff going on in the world, and I quite like not kind of nature programs, but almost like where they'll show you like a volcano exploded, or I watched a really good one recently. It was terrible. It was fascinating to watch, but the story was dreadful. It was the tourist in New Zealand who went across to the island and then the volcano erupted, and I just remember this bit where there was about 3 parties of people on the island, and they were going to this. It was like a lagoon, and the lagoon was described as this emerald green crystal water. Not today. It's all foaming. Isn't this a novelty? It's all foamy and white, and it's starting to jet up, and you think, because there's an eruption happening. It was dreadful. They literally had to get off the island within minutes, and some of them were on honeymoon and some of them were business people on a tour. At that moment, that meant nothing. It was everyone for themselves. And I think I just love seeing things that have really happened, kind of true facts and stuff like that.
I like, there's a few, they're not really TV shows, but they're channels on YouTube. There are 1 or 2 travelogue shows that I watch. There's one called The Endless Adventure, which is a couple from America. They used to travel over the whole world, and then in the pandemic they renovated an RV, and and then because they're based in America, they have kind of started to go a bit further afield again, but they're also kind of driving around America, and it's just kind of interesting because I haven't been able to travel as much with my rheumatism and stuff. I kind of appreciate seeing some of these places that I haven't got to yet, or may never get to. But it's still nice to, you can never go, everywhere anyway. So it's always nice to see.
But I suppose with internet and well, I suppose it's basically the internet, isn't it? Because we can choose what we want to watch. You can go anywhere you want to go on your screen, and that's interesting around kind of traveling around. That's something I'd like to perhaps do at one point in my life, maybe travel somewhere. And I was thinking a few weeks ago, it would be interesting to travel, maybe if you think of a whole continent, to maybe go from one end to the other. And for the Americas, to perhaps start in Alaska. I don't even know if it's possible. You're going through multiple countries with different political situations going on. But would it be possible to perhaps go from Alaska through Canada to through the States to Mexico, and then perhaps some of the South American countries, and perhaps end up at the bottom down in Chile or something where it's pretty cold? And is it what's the really bit at the bottom where is that Santiago?
I'm not. I should know better. I should know better.
How similar does that feel to right at the top? And it would be. I mean, I don't even know how long it would take. It's probably about a 6-month trip or something, because it's it's pretty much north to south, isn't it? But something like that would really interest me. How
adventurous are you with holidays and things? I've seen you go to. Yeah.
I like going to different places, but I've got a bad back, and I have a bit of sciatica from time to time, so I'm not keen to be climbing mountains, Paul.
No. But
those days are gone. But I like to visit somewhere different, and maybe somewhere I've never been before. Tried some different food, and just experience the kind of real culture of it.
I feel like I've kind of stayed relatively safe. I've never been to Australia, for instance. I mean, I've always kind of wanted to, but then I've also very hot and poisonous spiders and
snakes.
Snakes and stuff, and maybe it's just safer to watch Prisoner, or you get to see the beach if you watch Home and Away. You got a whole range. If you want to see a hospital in Australia, you watch Young Doctors.
Having watched more Australian content in the last 2 or 3 years, obviously with the pandemic and stuff, when we had a lot more time to sit around and watch stuff, and obviously stuff's become more available through streaming and DVDs. There's a lot more now than there was maybe 10 years ago. Australia really is on my list now of places I'd really like to visit, and maybe do all those things. Perhaps go from Melbourne to Sydney and maybe go across. Is it the Nullarbor to where Nola Mackenzie came from?
They do that journey from. So is it Adelaide to Sydney on Sons and Daughters? They do it very quickly. They're in one scene, they're in one, and then a couple of seasons later, they've already trained. They're already in sync. Yeah.
Let's be honest, it's one studio to the next, isn't it? I
didn't hear. I thought it was real.
I was reading a thing. I can't remember which actor it was, but I was reading something the other day where they were talking about how the filming schedule, they do so many days in the studio in Sydney. And to burst the bubble, everything that was filmed in Melbourne in the houses was still it was filmed in Sydney, but then they'd have to fly them down or shuttle them down to Melbourne to do a couple of outdoor scenes. And sometimes it would be kind of like Beryl comes to the front door and steps outside and turns around and waves at someone, goes back in, and it's just that wave bit that was done. And you think that was really ambitious to kind of have that single wave shot, and that's why she's down in Melbourne for a couple of hours.
Yeah, I'm getting towards the last 100 episodes at the moment. I'll be really interested because you're doing quite well. Listeners, we were guaranteed to be talking about Australian soap operas at some point, just a little bit of this episode. But because I've got Andy hooked on Sons and Daughters now.
I'm on season 2.
Good. So
I think it won't be too much of a shock that we are going to come back and talk about that again, aren't we?
Yeah,
we'll do a special one on that.
But it's just weird that some people really don't like the later seasons, and it all seems to come down to a particular producer who takes over in, I think, beginning of season 4, but I love it was season 5 and season 6 that I watched originally back in the 90s, and I'm watching those again now, and I'm still loving them, and I just don't understand why people don't like it. It's evolved and changed, and it's just really addictive.
I suppose it's back to that thing we said about Scream, that it's very unusual that something that runs for a long time keeps the momentum going at the same quality. Very often things start to tail off a bit, and something else that I really enjoyed was Orange is the New Black. But again, towards the end, I kind of felt. I thought the season was there a season where they had a riot, and it was like the whole that season was like. I thought that was quite well done. But
I like that season.
The next season was a bit.
I've never actually watched the last few episodes because I was a bit like. It's lost something. It's lost something, but I really like that season where it was all where they taken it. It was good that they devoted the whole season to that plot line.
And another one that I watched, which I don't know whether or not people still think it's acceptable to watch this now, given what kind of happened, but House of Cards. I found that really gripping, but again, the last season, it's just like I've watched maybe 3 episodes and got bored of it. And you think something that gripped me so much in the early series, but then as soon as it kind of gets to the last season and he's gone and it's the wife that's now the president, I just thought this is just daft. It
is bad because I know people don't necessarily tend to. I mean, I do tend to still buy. If I like something a lot, I want to have a DVD or I want to have a Blu-ray, but because you never know where it's. I mean, a lot of the Australian soaps they're not on channels you can stream anyway, so we wouldn't want to be held hostage by some particular. We want to own them, but I did. I used to like Walking Dead, and I bought quite a few seasons of that.
Yes.
But then I started to not enjoy it. And then now I'm not sure. So I've got like the first, say, 6 or 7 seasons, and because I didn't like it so much after that, am I ever going to go back and watch those first 6 knowing that I don't like the latest. Is the whole show dead for me now, literally, or not literally? But I did actually go back and finally, because it was on Disney Plus when we had Disney Plus, and I thought, okay, I'll watch those last few seasons I never saw, and it did sort of pick up again in the last season or so. But there was. It's a shame when a series goes on for ages and you really like it early on, or at some point of it, and then at some point it kind of goes off the boil for you, and it's difficult to know how to feel about a show that's done that. But
I know something I really don't like is reality TV. I haven't really got time for any of that. I just find it quite. Is it lowest denominator or something? Yeah. It's just dreadful, isn't it? It's cheap to make, cheap to show, and it's just pointless.
I watched like Big Brother when it was new, like the first 2 or 3 seasons or whatever. But I'm generally not that keen. And I've never really been into the sort of the X Factors and that sort of thing, because to me I want to know. I don't really care about the formation of I'm not saying that I haven't bought some music by some of the winners, but that would have had to have been because I liked the song, not
because you followed.
Not because I followed it, because it doesn't really. To me, it doesn't matter how interesting that might be to some people. If there's sort of songs they're going to do are rubbish, then. Well, I'm not interested anymore.
It's so disposable, though, isn't it? And to think in the 80s, people used to talk about a lot of the. I find it quite funny. I saw recently there was the documentaries on about Stock Aitken Waterman, and they, at the time when all that music was out in the late 80s, it was this is just disposable rubbish pop music. Yeah. Funny how 40 years later people are still talking about it, and people are still watching Rick Astley doing his dance on YouTube, and people are still interested, whereas there's perhaps a lot of other music from that era that's gone and forgotten, apart from maybe a few niche fans.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things. I think we're probably going to be skipping around subjects as we mention them. But one of the things I don't know really is what music you like. What you?
I've got really broad taste in music.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not sure I have a favourite band. What about yourself? You tell me what you like, and then I'll say whether or not I like that.
Well, I probably said I like. Well, to start with, in the 80s, I was really keen on the 60s. So I loved the Beatles when I was like 10 or 11 or whatever. I loved the Beatles, and I loved ABBA. So I started with the Beatles and ABBA, which I think is a very good starting point, because you've got the rock side and you've got the pop side. And I think I was very influenced by what my parents wanted me to listen to, or what they felt was acceptable to them, or they didn't mind hearing the Beatles, or they didn't mind hearing ABBA. I was in Greece in like 1980, and I remember going to a record shop. They were trying to find something that they could buy me for. This was before my brother came along, so I was the only child at that point. And I remember them buying the ABBA album Voulez-Vous, which must have been about a year old at the time. And but I don't know I'd shown any interest in ABBA particularly at that point. I think it was perhaps they wanted to hear it, but I've always been more into music than my parents. But I say my parents were the sort of people who might buy a greatest hits, whereas if I get into something, I want to have all the albums of the bands I like, so it took me a while to sort of get it to catch up with the 80s, because I'd been listening to old music. And the first, I remember Buying a tape of Blondie, but hiding it because I wasn't sure if I was allowed to have anything that wasn't sanctioned by my parents. And then the first new album I bought that was in the charts when I bought it was the second Pet Shop Boys album.
Right.
And then I would kind of explore bands that were kind of maybe had the template of ABBA and the Beatles. So perhaps other 60s bands, or rather embarrassingly, things like Bucks Fizz, because 2 men, 2 women. They must be like ABBA. I wasn't trendy at all. And also, obviously, I was into ABBA after they split up, when the only people who liked ABBA were people's parents. So I got taken a mickey off for liking ABBA, which of course is one of those things that, it's their fortunes have been revived, and
so one of the 1960s bands that I really like is the Mamas and the Papas.
Oh yeah, definitely, yes.
I think all their songs are just fantastic, and I can remember somebody bought me a compilation tape. It was one of their greatest hits albums on a cassette, and I just couldn't stop playing it. And I've got all their albums.
Yeah.
And I just think some of the tracks that people are less familiar with are actually quite psychedelic and quite. I like the way that on I think maybe it's their second and third album, there's a real switch between the tracks where Michelle's singing and the tracks where Cass is singing, and I just think it. I know they were mostly a vocal band because I think it was studio musicians that they worked with, but I just think the harmonies between them and the story of how they got together. And I know there's one song where they go through it all.
Yeah, that's right.
They talk about
never know how to pronounce that. Like Creaky Alley or something.
Creaky
like
Alley,
that. Yeah.
And it's the history of the different. And actually, when you Google it, they were actually quite mixing with some quite significant people, and wasn't John behind organising one of the big pop festivals in the late 60s? I don't think it was Woodstock, but it was something on quite a big level. Just fascinating to read the story, and obviously so sad that Cass died a few years later. So that's one of the kind of 60s bands that I like.
But I kind of get quite Magpie like, and I might like say at one point I might completely overlook a band, and something will interest me, and suddenly I'll be like really keen on David Bowie or something like that, or I hear a song and then suddenly I want to know all about David Bowie, and sometimes it's friends playing songs or hearing one particular song that is perhaps an obscure song and thinking, I like the sound of that one. I was very into Britpop when I was at university,
right?
And started going to gigs. I never sort of the really massive bands, not the Blurs and Oasis, although I was really into Blur, but I saw bands like Pulp and Elastica and Sleeper and the medium-sized bands, smaller venues, and then also some of the really more obscure ones that didn't necessarily have hits.
I can remember from uni days, interesting that you mentioned kind of uni time, I can remember really being into Sonic Youth and Nirvana, but also Saint Etienne.
Yeah, I like Saint Etienne.
Who else was there from that era? I was also, probably from being a bit younger than that, I was, and still am today, really keen on the B-52s. I've always thought their music was really, really good.
Yeah, B-52s is one of my favourites.
I can remember being, in fact, this is one of my early memories. I can remember being in probably been the town centre where I grew up, and maybe walking past a shop that had got a TV on. Maybe it was like an early MTV or something, and seeing the Rock Lobster being, I don't know whether it was their video or whether they were playing it live, but it was a clip, and thinking, that's amazing, and just being really fascinated by it. And then maybe 6 months later hearing it again on the radio and just being really astounded by it. And then once I did start buying tapes and CDs myself, they were a band that I really kind of looked out for.
I've seen them live twice.
Have you?
Yeah, and also I had tickets for them 2 other times where they cancelled, so I was kind of beginning to think I was never going to get to see them. The first time I think I had tickets was around the time of September 11th, so understandably they wanted to cancel. And then I feel like, because they did an album, the last album they did was about 2007, and I think that they possibly, which I really loved that album, but
was that Funplex?
Funplex, yeah.
Funplex,
yeah, and I feel like perhaps the album, I don't know if they cancelled because they thought the stuff, it would be ready and it got pushed back. So, but anyway, I did see them twice in London. I think I also saw them perhaps a little bit late, maybe in the early teens as well.
I follow them on Instagram.
Yeah.
They've just announced 2 more performances, although they finished touring now.
Yeah.
I think they're still gonna, and it's just Fred and Kate and Cindy now that are doing the performances, because I think Keith's decided he's still part of the band, but he isn't going to appear with them. But they've announced a couple more performances for later in the year. But it's just amazing following them, and to think that there might be people that you were quite a fan of maybe back in the day. now you can follow them on Instagram, and you could even message. I mean, they're probably not going to message you back, but you never know. They might read what you've said. And I think there was one where I'd made a comment on, and it was liked, and it was like, oh, that actually meant something, because you don't know who I am. You know, you obviously not if they listen to this podcast, they might work out who I am. But just to think that you've actually read what I've said. I just think that kind of feedback element of where we are today with digital age is quite powerful.
I've had short Twitter chat. We'll come back to music, but I'm a fan of the Tales of the City books by Armistice Maupin, and I've had little conversations on Twitter with him. I presume it's him. I got him to sign some. Well, I went on his website and I paid for him to sign some books to me, but I got him to sign them to Shy Yeti. And when I got the book, I sort of took a photo and said, it arrived, and he said, "Oh, nice to put a face to the Shy Yeti." And I was thinking, one of my favourite authors. He knows. He doesn't know who I am, but he knows of me. He has thought of the word Shy Yeti.
Because you've got that distinctive name, and that kind of would stick in someone's memory. So well done. That's really good.
Yeah, and there's other, with the Doctor Who liking and various other shows I like. You do get to have little chats, or you say something and that they, you get likes, or you get little comments. Or I remember being told by I think I tweeted to some 80s Doctor Who companion, and I was on a cold, like Clapham Junction station, and she tweeted back, keeping the warm. I've been told to keep in the warm by a 1980s Doctor Who companion.
That's great. Just on music, and I mean, I'm not the only person that likes this. There's at least a couple of others as well, but I also really like all the incidental music from Prisoner, and there's a couple of people online who, in fact, one of them I actually met him years ago. In Coventry, they find out and they upload all of the tracks that are played in the background on a lot of the kind of TV shows, but predominantly the Australian ones, and a lot of it is kind of 70s and 60s funk and some of the incidental pieces as well. You can go down real rabbit holes with that, because I know there was somebody who'd looked at episodes and actually worked out what the tracks were and done a playlist. And I just find that fascinating as well, to kind of stalk other people's playlists and what they're listening to. But if you Google it, there's stuff out there on YouTube. You can find all of the tracks. And sometimes if I'm in the house alone, I'll just play some of those and pretend I'm still back in the laundry or. With another cup of tea.
Yay! I was going to say about the B-52s. I remember around the time, I think I probably got into them. I also connected the B-52s with somebody who was I was interested in the early 90s as well, but they lent me the first greatest hits, which had all the early stuff on. And okay. I remember that being quite I wanted to like it because I liked him, but it compared to what else I've been listening to up to that point, it was quite different to what I've been listening. It was quite different to the Beatles, quite different to ABBA, plus it's quite different to Pet Shop Boys, and it took me a while to sort of my mind to kind of. I think they were a good band to get into, because those sorts of things. If you always listen to very similar types of things, you're never going to explore what. But that sort of helped me sort of like once my brain could cope with B-52s, then I could explore out and out and
I was at uni with someone who was really obsessed with the B-52s, and I think she'd seen them. She'd been over to the States and had seen them, and absolutely loved them. And I can remember asking what's your favourite album, and I don't think I've got one. I think they're all good. I think they're all good in different ways. I really like the first two albums because apparently that they'd written all of those songs originally. Put half of them on the first album, and then when they got their record deal and were going to continue, the material that hadn't been on the first album went on the second album. So you've got that whole set, that whole kind of. I think for me, those first two albums are almost like a part one and a part two, and then you've got that project that they did with David Byrne that didn't quite work out, but there's some really good tracks on it, Mesopotamia and Loveland, and that's an amazing track. Loveland is
Quiche Lorraine.
And the one about the cake. Let's kind of. You think what's that referencing? Is that drugs? Who knows? But then you've got the switch then to I guess the kind of more mid-80s, the synth pop stuff with the
Bouncing Off Satellites. That's a weird album because that's a little bit like their old stuff, but then a little bit like what they were about to do.
And the other one, Whammy.
Yes.
With Song for a Future Generation, some of the listeners might be familiar with, where they all get a little part in that, don't they? They all say what they like and
Star Signs again.
and I remember I was fascinated. They'd recorded a track which was a cover of a Yoko Ono song, which was "Don't Worry," but she wasn't happy with this, and the record company forced them to kind of remove it from the album, and they had to do an instrumental version of an earlier track and replace it. And I've always been fascinated trying to. Well, I mean, it was leaked online a few years ago, but I can remember in the 90s being fascinated trying to get hold of a copy of Don't Worry by the B-52s or trying to find a copy of the album that actually had it on, because apparently there were some that were pressed originally. And it's a really bizarre track with them shrieking and making weird noises and it's very different and quite creative, I think.
I was I'd got to the point I was liking them around the time when and I've got what's the album the album they did in 93, 92, 93 before they stopped.
Good Stuff.
Good Stuff. Yes, I knew it was the name of the single.
And Cindy's not on that album, is she?
That's right. No,
that's where she kind of retired by then and said, "Look, thanks guys, it's been a blast, but we've all kind of moved on." And she kind of stepped back at that point, hadn't she?
But I had all the singles from those albums on CD single around the time I was starting university and things like that, and so I remember that being a really big album at the time.
See, if fate had brought us together back then, we might have been able to sit and talk about that back then.
Other 80s bands I'm really into. I love Duran Duran. I didn't necessarily like Duran Duran in the 80s, but I love them now. Yeah. And I started to like them. There was a couple of things that happened. I had a copy of Decade, the greatest hits, the first greatest hits, when I went on holiday, and I was never. When I was a teenager, I never was a sulky teenager, except for one holiday when I went to Spain. I remember being sulky for just 2 weeks. The sunshine light other than that. And I remember taking quite a lot of books. I was probably reading a lot of Agatha Christie, and I took about a book a day with me, and I sat in the car a lot and didn't go, and I got a copy of Decade, and I just listened to that, and that kind of saved that holiday for me. And then when I went to university, I had at the end of my first term, I had a bit of a trouble, a bit of a heartbreak, and it was when the Wedding album came out, which had Ordinary World and that sort of thing, and I just remember playing that album loads and loads as I was wandering around Sutton Park trying. I would also at the same time my video camera. I just started doing Sutton Park at that point, and my video camera packed up. And so just when I needed distraction, when something like that had happened, I mean, obviously I was still doing my university work supposedly, but I needed to be as busy as possible. And my video camera packed up for about 3 months, which I always blame when it came back. That's why I think I end up doing so many episodes of Sutton Park, was because that 3 months when I really wanted to get started and get going with it. So when I did get it back, I just went crazy, really.
So did you straight from school to A levels to university.
Yeah.
So that's the same as me. So we'll have been at university in the same. I think we said that last time when we spoke.
Right,
you came up to the Midlands.
Yeah, and you left.
and I went further north. So that's kind of, we went our separate ways then, didn't we? So that would be the same era.
Yeah.
What did you do your degree in?
Library and Information Studies.
Wow.
Which is because I was a librarian, like, until relatively recently, for all those years after my but it runs in the family. My mum was a librarian until she had me, and then my aunt and uncle were also librarians. But I chose my course via clearing because I wanted to do media studies, and that was the year that we went to university, was when media studies was like the new subject, and you really needed 3 A's to do it, and I wasn't ever going to get 3 A. I was good at English, but that's all I was good at, really. I was just good at English.
I did an English degree, but I got my place through clearing as well, because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And I think as I was coming towards the end of my A levels, I was maybe starting to feel a little bit uncertain with what I wanted to do with my life. And I did a sociology A level as well, and I was more interested in that than I was in English, but I was good at English. And we'd done at A level, we'd had a bit of a drama module, and I'd been really good at that and really loved it. And but I was more interested in sociology, but I kind of lost the I think I'd lost my my mojo when I was doing my A levels, and I was contemplating how will my life play out, and perhaps thinking about what might be, perhaps a bit more than I should have been about what I perhaps should have been doing, which was some of the work. So my A level results weren't as good as I'd hoped for. So that's how I ended up getting a place through clearing, and it was English, because that was the one that I'd actually done really well in.
Because when I did GCSE, it was English language and English literature, but they weren't offering. The trouble is, there was such a focus on me trying to get to the grammar school, because we have grammar schools around here, and I didn't pass the 11 plus, but I got sent to this horrible private school for 2 years, which I really, really hated. But I passed 13 plus, so then I went to the grammar school. But the subject, the range of subjects was very limited. It was very traditional. I really ought to have gone to main levels at the college, because I could have done film studies, or I could have done. I was struggling to find subjects for A level, and I didn't really like English literature. I liked doing the creative side, but you couldn't do English language for A level. And I definitely didn't want to go to university and do anything to do with English literature, because I just didn't like anything that we did for English literature.
I've got to say, a lot of it, I mean, if you ask me what I read in my degree, a lot of it has just gone out of my head, because you just read it, write an essay on it, and then it's gone. Bang on to the next one. Who we were reading now, right? We're doing Shakespeare now. God, this is a different language. You've got to kind of get your brain into how it's actually written, and then it's almost like doing a foreign language book. Let's write an essay, bang, it's gone, move on to the next one. I would rather have done creative English as well, rather than literature.
Yeah, the weird thing was, because I would never have said I liked poetry, and I certainly didn't like the poetry we did. I love song lyrics. We did Sylvia Plath. I think that was A level, and she's not a good poet to introduce to a 16 or 17-year-old. She's not somebody that you're going to go, wow, I love poetry after reading Sylvia Plath. They should have done like Roger McGough or Spike Milligan or something that's fun. And actually, I started writing spoofs of Sylvia Plath poetry, because and sometimes my teachers thought that I was being sincere, and I wasn't. So, and then I started writing my own poetry, which was kind of more like Victoria Wood, sort of silly little Pam Ayresy type things. And then, of course, eventually I ended up writing poetry books and doing performance poetry and little gigs and things. And I would never have thought I would have done that, because I didn't like poetry enough. But I did like song lyrics, and I always say that song lyrics is what inspired me to write all the poems I wrote over the years.
Wow, that's amazing.
But
you'll have to share some of your poetry with me.
Yeah,
I quite like poetry, because I think for me poetry is more immediate, and it's more you can concentrate more on what's there. One of the legacies, if you like, of having done an English English studies kind of degree is now I'm too analytical when I read, and I'm too what's the author trying to mean by that, and what's the context of this, and what's being codified, and kind of what's the center of it, and trying to deconstruct everything to the point where you just think, I'm not enjoying it. I'm not enjoying reading this book. I'm still on the first page and I'm trying to look for too much. I'm not actually getting pleasure from it. Whereas I think with poetry, maybe a bit like viewing art in a in an art gallery, it either pulls you in or it doesn't. And I think with poetry, it's if it gets you, it really kind of gets you.
And I never, reading wise, I never read things I would say. I read a lot, and I've certainly, since I've not been working, I read about 45 books last year, which I don't know. Some people who read fast, that's probably not that much, but that was the most I've read in a long time. That many, because I kind of wake up in the morning and I read for a couple of hours, and I might be reading like 5 books at once. Like I read a few chapters and then I'll swap to the next book, and I read a lot of autobiographies. Quite often strong women, whether they be actresses, musicians. I'm reading an autobiography by Vivienne Westwood at the moment. I'm not 100% sure why. I guess it's partly because she died, and she died recently, didn't she? So, and I thought, I think that would probably be quite interesting. But back in the day, I kind of jumped from the books that you were supposed to read at school to adult books, and but sort of I was very keen on Agatha Christie for a while. I read a lot of Stephen King, and the thing is, I'd read too many. I'd read like loads of Stephen King, and then to the point where I was sick of Stephen King and didn't read him again for about 10 years. And then I was lucky enough to work in a library. One of my first jobs, although it was a Ministry of Defence library, there was also a college, and the students were living on campus, so there was a big fiction section. So wow. I was able. People would say to me, "Oh, you should try Daphne du Maurier," or "You should." I really got into Ruth Rendell or Barbara Vine's sort of psychological thrillers, not the Inspector Wexford stuff, but the sort
some of her other novels.
Yeah, and it was all there to try, but it was never the sort of classics. It was always relatively mainstream type.
So you mentioned autobiographies and strong women. Was it you I was talking to that's read Sheila Florence's book?
No, but I did just buy it. So maybe we need to. Yeah, I bought it because of the rheumatism. I've been tending to read things digitally because it's just easier than mucking around with books that where your fingers aren't feeling great. And but yeah, I bought it very recently. I don't know if it might have been because you mentioned it, but I found it easy, cheap to buy from digital.
Have you read it yet?
Not yet. No, I've also got Maggie Fitzpatrick's to read as well. I've had that.
You'll have to let me know what you think when you've read it. In fact, well, maybe we could do a book review of it.
Yeah. I have done episode. I did an episode earlier this year where I went through all 45 of the books I read in 2022.
Wow.
It's the good thing about this show. We can do whatever we like. We can do about any subject we like. And if people are interested in the subject, they can come back next week and see what's on next week. But I still want to talk about music because other
Sorry,
bands,
we've drifted off.
It's fine. We just do whatever we like on this show.
We knew this would happen.
Yeah, we knew this would happen. Other 80s bands I love include the Bangles. I love the Bangles.
Okay.
I saw the Bangles much more recently, well, about 10 years ago in LA, because they sort of split up at the end of the 80s, and then they came back and did a couple more albums. And I guess I just like, I like people like Belinda Carlisle and the Go-Go's and that sort of girls with guitars are kind of cool.
She's recently been over in Britain, hasn't she, I think? And she was interviewing Belinda has.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there was somebody that had reached out to her and maybe someone who'd been a fan for years, and she actually, as a result of them reaching out, I think maybe they'd interviewed her on breakfast TV or something, and the fan had rung in and she went and saw them or something. And I remember seeing that on Instagram.
She just had a new single out.
That's yeah.
It might be why she was.
There is that as well. And here's a copy of my new single while I stand in a photograph with you. Long life, Sam. Not to be too cynical, but I mean, I suppose if you ask me what was my favourite kind of music overall, I think probably kind of 70s disco, funk, that kind of thing. So that's not really one band or one act. That's like a million different records, isn't it? But that's probably, if I was thinking, let's just put some music on, I'd probably go for a playlist that was, and not necessarily all the commercial stuff as well, but just kind of like a 70s funk stroke, early disco kind of vibe.
You mentioned Stockhaven Waterman earlier, and one of my other big loves is Kylie, the more stereotypical elements of of my musical taste. But I wouldn't say I liked her with the I Could Be So Lucky era so much.
The earlier stuff.
Yeah, she just sort of slowly grew on me over the years, and the fact that she was around so long, and there was something like Hand on Your Heart. I remember thinking, oh, I quite like that one. And then in the early 90s, she had that album which had Step Back in Time and Shocked, and all four singles were, these are four really good singles.
The song that she did that I thought was really good was the one, was it with Nick Cave, where she's lying in a river? Yeah. Is she supposed to be dead in that?
Yeah, I think so, because that's his Murder Ballads album, so
I mean, they admit that I Should Be So Lucky was written in about 20 minutes, wasn't it? And I didn't realise till I watched the documentary a few weeks ago that apparently she'd been sent over, I don't know which one's which, the one who was the producer, he'd arranged for her to come to London to record a track with them and hadn't told the other two. So they were kind of busy working away with Rick Astley and Bananarama and everybody else. And I think the agent was like, well, look, it's Friday tomorrow. We fly back to Melbourne. What's happening? We've been sat in London for a week, and they basically had to fit her in at 3:00 on kind of in the afternoon as a bit of a rush job. And so I think that they kind of admit themselves it was a bit of a rushed thing that they did, obviously that was what kind of launched her career, wasn't it? But I suppose it was Neighbours that launched her career, wasn't it?
Yeah. After Britpop, because I think I got a bit snobby, or the people I knew who liked Britpop. You couldn't like pop. Towards the end of Britpop, stuff like Britney Spears were coming in, and it was very difficult not to like Baby One More Time. It's a very catchy song, and so slowly I just kind of like just going to like whatever I like. And if I like an indie song, I like an indie song. If I like a pop song, I like a pop song. And I was friends with some guys who in the noughties who were mostly into more indie stuff, but we all secretly admitted that. Again, we didn't watch the reality show, but we all liked Girls Aloud and the Sugar Babes. But again, really, was it anything to do with Girls Aloud, or was it because they had very good writers and they did some really interesting? They did their basic covers, but then it would be they do also quite weird songs and songs that weren't conventional structures.
And I suppose once you start to move into the reality show era, no disrespect to them, they are good singers. The fact that they've got through the rounds, the people on the panel, you can see how closely I've watched it. By the time the people on the panel have pressed the buzzer, the people who win and get the contracts, fair play to them, they are good singers, but it's just forgettable, isn't it?
But it does
you're right, the people who write the stuff's good. It just makes me wonder if in 40 years' time will people still be talking about them.
I don't think. Well, I mean, the people who wrote, say, Girls Aloud stuff didn't necessarily write their solo stuff, and their solo careers weren't. I almost think that they perhaps thought that people were watching for them, and actually a lot of people who like the music, and it could have been any five girls really. And they were just a bit, sort of channeling this sort of Bananarama type mixture of old and new, and.
But I suppose for me the difference is when Bananarama reformed, they did a tour, didn't they? About 2 years ago. It still felt like there was a lot of attention on them, and they were interviewed on quite a lot of programs, and there was a lot of stuff in the press about them, and it was kind of a bit of a nostalgia thing. But I wonder if in another 10 years, if people like the Spice Girls come back together, or Girls Aloud, will there be quite so much interest in them then?
I don't know. I mean, there's always the people who were kids at the time who remember them fondly. I mean,
fair thing.
It's a bit like when people talk about Doctor Who, older people are like, oh, I didn't like those later ones. But there'll be people who were kids when there's always somebody who was a fan when other people would think, oh, well, it wasn't popular then. But I feel like virtually everybody will have a fan. But sort of when you think back of it, everyone's got a different era. So I mean, these days, I kind of drifted a bit with music a little bit, But then I started talking to another podcaster in America, and he's very good at the sort of keeping an eye on stuff, and started kind of, oh, have you heard this one? Have you heard that? So now I tend to have playlists of songs I like, and sometimes it's people I've liked for 30 years. Sometimes it's new pop acts. I also like people like Belle and Sebastian, who've been around since the 90s, and a lot of these bands, Duran Duran did a great album when it was their 40th album, so about 2021. They did a really, because they're like Bananarama, they've never gone away, but people think that they've done a new album, so they're reforming, but no, they
have actually kept going. They just haven't had the profile. That perhaps others would have had.
I find it quite difficult to focus on like listening. So there was a Belle and Sebastian album last year, which I liked the singles of, and I really should listen to the full album, but I've just stuck it on a playlist with that. And because I'm not working, I tended to listen when I was commuting. So I don't have quite so much time for listening to podcasts because because I'm not going out there, or I try and find time for these things. But even when you're not working, there's not enough time to do everything.
See, that's another thing at the moment. It's finding time to fit stuff in, isn't it? And if you listen to a podcast or you've got particular playlists that you want to listen to, when do you do it? Because if I'm out walking my dog, I might take my headphones out with me and listen to stuff while I'm out for half an hour doing that. Or if I'm in the car, I might connect my phone up and kind of listen to stuff that way. But it's finding time to do everything, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's so much choice and so much stuff that you can either listen to or watch, or it can get a bit overwhelming, I think.
And I can easily spend hours on YouTube just watching a lot. You start to watch, I quite like to see that video, and then suddenly that leaves you to, I must see that one, and then suddenly 5 hours have gone or something, and it's like 3:00 in the morning. I have to be, I can easily sort of, so I probably listen to more music than but it's not necessarily fitted in at the times when it would be better for me to. It's like, being sort of distracted. Funny times.
Have you ever found as well? Because I think I found this maybe with the B-52s, that listening to them now, it takes me back to how I felt at the time when I was maybe a bit more focused on listening to them a lot more. But I've had kind of spells in my life where I've maybe revisited a particular band or a particular album and listened to it and thought, this reminds me of... And when I've looked at the calendar, it's like, oh my God, that's like 15 years since I've listened to this. But it can really take you back and really evoke memories from the past.
I had some really weird ones, like... where it wasn't a particular event, but I went out with my parents for my mum's birthday back in January. We went to this particular pub in this village near us, and then we drove back home a different way round, a sort of back road through some woods. And I suddenly remembered cycling down that road when I was about 15, and I could remember listening to this was when I was in my Bucks Fizz phase, listening to Bucks. So I could remember being on a bike listening to Bucks Fizz, but nothing happened. It didn't like I fell off a bike, But I was like, I remember listening to Bucks Fizz when I was cycling down this road in 1980s. But why did I remember that? Why is that?
So, you mentioned the Beatles at the start of this, and the one album that I'm really familiar with is the one that probably no Beatles fan really probably is familiar with, and it's for alternative reasons. It's the White Album.
Oh yeah.
And I know that quite well. And that's as a result of reading true crime, because it's entwined with the story of the Manson killers, isn't it?
Yeah.
And in fact, it might have even been, I think I was house sharing, and I think someone I was living with had the White Album, and I was maybe reading the book and thinking, oh my God, this, I'm reading about these people in California in 1969 and the songs that they're listening to, and she's playing them in the next room, and then getting a copy of it and listening to it all the way through and thinking, you can kind of see maybe how some of the lyrics, some of the words maybe were a little bit, I don't know, they were taking drugs. Who knows how you're going to react, but and it's certainly not an excuse for the dreadful things that they did, but you can kind of see how maybe for someone who was under the influence, let's say, listening to certain, it's absolutely crazy, isn't it? Claiming that John Lennon and Paul McCartney were telling them to do certain things through the lyrics. It's just, it's nonsense. But it was interesting to be listening to the music while reading the book at the same time.
And I think that's quite an interesting album of theirs to be into.
It is, isn't it?
Because it's quite different, and it's almost a bit like 4 solo albums.
Yes, all strung together.
Yeah, they weren't very connected at the time,
and I quite
but
like
it's still
that.
Interesting. Yeah,
I quite like that because I like the way that you can have like a really sad, serious song, and then the next one's almost like completely different, and then something quite abstract, and then something that's like a pop song. And it's almost like a jukebox, isn't it?
Yes,
of songs.
Yeah, definitely. And I always hate it when I used to read music magazines that serious music journalists would always hate their more quirky or funny songs. They were like, "Oh, how can a band that wrote Hey Jude have written Yellow Submarine?" But when I was a 12-year-old, it would have been those songs that were my gateway into, because off the next album, Abbey Road, there's a song called Maxwell's Silver Hammer about a hammer that goes around killing people. And that would have been amazing when I was 12. I mean, I still think it's one of my favourites. But and there's there's quite a few silly songs like Bungalow Bill and
yes, Obladi Oblada,
yeah, but there's sort of wordplay and all sorts of things going on. I like the variety on there. And I like this, like Rocky Raccoon and things like that. They're just silly, but that's the sort of the reason they've probably got a lasting legacy is that they did write things like When I'm 64, and old grannies would be singing that. There's not many bands who write songs that could have, old granny isn't necessarily going to have liked every single Beatles song, but she might have heard some of the more sort of nostalgic type ones that Paul McCartney used to write. And like I always remember my great aunt, not with the Beatles, but with she wouldn't have been a massive ABBA fan, considering that she'd have been quite, I don't know, 60s when ABBA was big, but she knew Money, Money, Money. And that's a song that kind of transcended different sort of age groups. And I think that's really, really clever if you can kind of get to the grannies as well.
Interested. This is something I've thought about, and this, I guess, kind of comes into watching Prisoner as well. They were writing those songs 20 years after the end of World War II. The songs in the mid-60s. And you think that was only 20 years after the war.
And
it's a different era, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've done episodes about we've sort of we did it in a weird order. We've done episodes on, they weren't done chronologically, but we've done episodes on every year from 1950 to about 2000. And we did it in a weird order, but we did the 50s last year, and some of the songs that were like number one hits, like in the 50s, songs like How Much Is That Doggy in the Window, which I remember being sung when I was a kid, but I had no idea that it was actually a chart-topping hit.
What era is it from? Yeah,
it's sort of mid 50s, but it was number one in America and the UK. And you think, God, I never thought of that as a song that would be anything more than a nursery rhyme, really. And
certainly people wouldn't go out and buy it and put it to number one.
But then 10 years later, and that in that period, what people were listening to in, say, 1955 compared to what they were listening to in 1965 was really, things have really developed in like that sort of 10-year period.
If you think back now to where, what was the culture, what was the experience 20 years ago from us? From where we are now in the early 2020s, you're back to just after the millennium, and think back to the music of the early noughties, as you said, and for the Beatles writing in the 1960s, that was the war for them. So that really is that really kind of puts it into context. Really, I think it's I find things like that quite interesting. How there's different cultural influences, and maybe something that we might feel uncomfortable with now was really popular back then, or vice versa. There might have been things that people were being new or challenging or pushing the boundaries, and now it just seems really, it's nothing.
I think things that we had ridiculous songs that got to number one in all eras, things like Mr. Blobby and things like that being number one. I mean, these
novelty records.
Novelty records. I wanted to ask, going back to travel. I wanted to ask if if you were going to say places you have been to, what would be your favourite holidays you've had, say overseas or even in the UK? Where would be your favourite holiday destination in the UK, and where would be your favourite holiday destination overseas?
Oh gosh, I think if it was in the UK, it would probably be Scotland. I'm half Scottish, and when I was a kid, we used to have lots of trips back to Scotland to visit family up there. And my partner's Scottish, and we visit Scotland quite regularly. And you know, maybe when I retire, perhaps that's where I'll go. But probably somewhere in Scotland would be somewhere to visit. But I'm one of those people that gets attacked by the midges. So I have to think in advance when I go and where I am in Scotland, because you don't want to get bitten. But I just find it really it just feels so far away from, I suppose, a lot of hustle and bustle. I mean, maybe if you're in the middle of Glasgow, it doesn't, but you can be in parts of more rural Scotland and just feel so far away from everything else, like it just doesn't matter.
One of my best friends and my former flatmate, he had relatives in Dunbar, so I've spent a lot of time in Edinburgh, although we have toured all over Scotland. But the UK place I love probably most of all is the Lake District, particularly Keswick and Dwentwater, and I used to like going on the boat and then kind of wandering around the. I was never, when I went to the lakes, I was never a mountain climber. I was always a lakeshore walker.
Sit by the lake.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I'm totally with you on that. I have really good memories of when the dog was quite young, we took her to Coniston Water, and that was the first place that she actually ever drank from a river or from like a lake. And we went back a few years later. She went to exactly the same spot and drank the water again, exactly the same spot. And it was like, this is just weird. She's kind of pulling us. So there must be something about that kind of spot there, or she remembered it. But no, the lakes are beautiful.
But what about overseas? Have you got a holiday that you particularly, or a place you've gone to more than once that you always like?
I don't think I could pick one. No. Something that really sticks in my mind that was a particularly good holiday, but it's a city break, was San Francisco. And I'd love to go back there. If you said, let's go tomorrow, I'd be like getting the suitcase out. If it was more of like a holiday to relax and chill, I really like Mexico. I'd love to go back to Mexico again. But then I like Greece as well. So
I went to San Francisco for my 30th. And enjoyed that, and then that was partly because of the Tales of the City thing I wanted to go and see. But the place that I've been to most of all, that I probably would say, I think I probably have got a place that I love Venice, and I've been there about 10 times. And I've been there. I was taken there. I had a partner who was very keen on doing like we just go away for a weekend, like a Friday to Monday. So I tried quite a few places, and we went to Venice, and then I sort of kept going back with different people and different friends. I've even been to Venice twice by myself, and I just like the sort of wandering down streets and kind of, oh, shall I go left or right? Oh, I wonder what's down here, and just sort of getting lost, and then finding an interesting square that you didn't know existed. Or I think there's still quite a lot of Venice I've not done, or like the sort of formal, like the museums and I haven't been to a lot of the actual, sort of, I've just done a lot of just wandering around and making silly poetry videos and getting on boats and I've even done day trips out of Venice to nearby cities, and when I got there, I thought, this isn't as good as Venice. I want to go back to Venice again.
Oh, that's really good.
Yeah, I last went in 2019. I'm hoping I'll have more mobility to go back again, but if not, then at least I did it a lot over a period of sort of from the mid-noughties to the late teens. So, but I went a lot.
Very good.
Subjects we've covered of kind of the sorts of chats I've had with people who I don't know whether, you know, there have been situations where back in the day I interviewed perhaps a podcaster from Pride 48 and I'd cover these sorts of travel, music, TV, books, and food was always one of them. So what sort of food is your favourite?
All of it.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can see, obviously the listeners can't, but I'm not the slimmest of people. But what's my favourite food? I like all sorts of food, really. Something with a bit of flavour in it. It doesn't matter where that's from.
Yeah.
I don't like bland food. I don't like microwave meals. I can't be doing with stuff that's just boiled potatoes and boiled vegetables. I like something with a bit of spice in it. Yeah. I love Indian food, Chinese food. When I went to Thailand back in January, Paul, I was eating Thai curry and for breakfast. It was just I could eat. In fact, we ate so much fried rice. I didn't think I'd get back on the plane. It was just, the food was just amazing there, and we did a Thai cookery course. And I didn't realise green Thai curry is mostly coloured from green chilies and basil leaves. I think I'd assumed that there'd be some maybe, I don't know, coriander in it or colouring or something, but it's literally just chili and basil, and they showed us how to do it all, and it was a different way of cooking, and it was quite interesting. And I've made a few dishes since we came back, and I love experimenting with stuff like that as well.
I'm not very good at doing cooking. I kind of, if they could make days like 30 hours or something, I would make the time for doing cooking, but podcasting and creative stuff, there's only a certain amount of hours in the day, so I've never really got into it. I'd always kind of like the idea of making cakes and things like that. Again, not that I should really be eating cakes too much, but I would like to do more cooking, but I think I'd like to do it with somebody, and that isn't currently my situation to have somebody to kind of do it with. So, but who knows?
I was just going to ask, are you a sweet tooth or a savoury tooth person? Because I'm guessing from what you said about cakes, maybe.
I used to be very into sweet. I think these days I'm more savoury, though. One of the reasons I like going to Venice, though, is the gelato, and I do love ice cream, and I always had a sweet tooth. I still can kind of go through a packet of wine gums, and
really,
but I'm much more into savoury, really. If I had to choose now,
if I had a packet of wine gums, I'd probably eat 2 or 3 of them, but that would be enough.
I'm like that with, say, I know people who, like, you offer them a packet of biscuits, and if you don't take them away, they'll eat the whole packet. I'm not so much. I can have a couple of biscuits and then put them away. Like when I went to see Scream the other day, I was like really looking forward to the pick and mix, because I haven't had a decent pick and mix for ages. The only problem being that it wasn't a decent pick and mix. The actual standard of the pick and mix they were horrible. The sweets.
That's no good.
Once I open a packet of sweets, it's harder for me not to eat the whole packet. But with biscuits or crisps, I can sort of just have a few and put them away. But
I could eat my body weight in crisps every day. There must be something addictive. I don't know whether it's the salt or the oil that they're fried in, but there's just something about crisps. I could just eat them every meal. I could eat crisps at every meal, and in between as well. Whereas chocolates, sweet things, I can put them to one side, but not fried potato.
I can be more restrained with chocolate. I would quite happily just have a piece of chocolate, if you had a bar of chocolate, I could just eat a couple of pieces and put it away. I don't know that I would have been so restrained years ago, but now but anyway, chocolate, like with ice creams, I often find that if you want an ice cream, or you want to go and buy an ice cream in a supermarket, unless it's a really big supermarket, sometimes all they have is chocolate or toffee, or I love like fruit flavored things when it comes to sort of ice creams or sorbets. And I was having a chat with somebody else, and we were sort of saying there's definitely a bias towards, I used to like the Cherry Garcia ice cream. There was a couple of times I've been round to a friend's house, and I said, "Oh, it'd be nice if we could have some ice cream." And we've gone into like a small, say, Tesco Metro, and they've had the Ben and Jerry's ice cream, but it's always the marshmallow ones or the fish one with chocolate in. It's all the chocolatey type things, and I'm like, well, where was the strawberry cheesecake one, or where's the?
So in Richmond, in North Yorkshire, there's a place where they make their own ice cream, so you can go and have it there. Actually, at the ice cream factory, and they do a flavour called sea buckthorn. That is the best, because it's bright orange. It's perhaps more of a coral colour. Yeah. But it's sweet. It's tangy. It's a bit acidic. It's a berry, I think it is. So for me, the flavour of the sea buckthorn and the creaminess of it as well, because it's ice cream, It sounds like it shouldn't work, but it doesn't. It's one of the best flavours I've ever had.
I used to have friends in London who had parents in Broadstairs, and we used to go down in the summer, sometimes for the folk festival, not necessarily to even go to watch people play, but just because it was a good time to go down. And there were two ice cream businesses, both Italian, and I did a lot of research into which was. I never worked out which was the best one, but I have to go from one to the other. And each day I was down, I'd have to have one from one. One day I was hoping I would work out which was the best, but I just never happened.
Did you have Wimpy when you were young?
The burger place. Yeah.
They used to do, and I think I've found some of the Crusher stuff in later years, but lime milkshake.
Oh yeah,
it's just with ice cream in it, but lime flavour is just a different level. And now, if people are like, "Oh, I'm having a milkshake," it's not the same.
No. Well, also, I used to go to more recently. We used to go to the Gourmet Burger Kitchen burger places in London, and when it first opened, they did a nice lime milkshake and a nice banana milkshake, but now they've got rid of those odd flavors. Obviously weren't that popular, and now they even stuff like the Nesquik milkshakes, you had much more range of flavor like 20-30 years ago than you do now. It's sort of it's a shame, because I do tend to like the weirder flavors, partly just to be bloody minded, and like I'm going to like the banana one because it's different.
It's different from what everybody else is having. That seems to be the case, though, doesn't it? That they discontinue some of the best stuff. I was going to ask as well, what food don't you like?
There isn't that.
What are you less keen on?
It's more like individual things, like radishes, rather than whole menus. I never really used to like beetroot, but I've had things cooked by a friend where they've managed to make radishes more interesting, or they've done something interesting with a beet. That sounds wrong. They've done something interesting with a beetroot, and it's changed my view of beetroots. But it's more like items rather than whole meals. I find it quite difficult to think of what I don't really like things on the bone so much. Like chicken wings. So I like chicken, but but I wouldn't not eat it. I just prefer not to be mucking around with it's just messy.
For me, I really love bread. I love tomatoes. I love cheese, but most pizzas, I can't stand them. I don't know what it is they do with commercial pizzas, but I just find them more. The bread's too doughy. The cheese is too overcooked. It's just if you make your own at home, it's probably really nice. And when I've been in Italy and had a proper Italian pizza, that was nice. But what we get in this country, I don't know whether they put sugar in the pizza dough, or there's just something that leaves a really horrible aftertaste.
I really like to go to an Italian restaurant with an Italian person, because I never know. You see the different sort of courses, and I'm like, well, I quite like a bit of gnocchi, but I also want a bit of this. And am I supposed to have all of these, or am I not supposed to have? How many courses am I supposed to be having? Or you perhaps if you have lasagna, it arrives and it's a tiny little piece. It's not enough for me.
Because you're getting another course afterwards.
Yeah, but I'm not sure how many courses I'm supposed to. But I might be ordering it because I thought that was going to be the main meal, and I just really need to go with an Italian who can say no. You're supposed to have one from there, one from there, one from there.
I'm not fussed on eggs either. Egg is something I don't mind if it's an ingredient, and sometimes people will assume that that's an allergy. If I ask for something without, if we went out for breakfast and no eggs, or were you allergic to them? It's not an allergy. And I know most people love a fried egg or a poached egg or a scrambled egg, but I just can't. I can't do it. No. I can't do it, Paul.
I don't mind eggs. I like eggs, but I'm trying to think of something else that I don't like. I am pretty much inclusive, food inclusive. No, there isn't that much I dislike. Just this is the problem, really. There's too much. I like too much.
I think for me, it's things that are perhaps too sugary, or things where they've put. I know when I've been to the States and Mexico, bread is so sweet over there. It's just I can't eat it. It's just too sugary. It's just full of corn syrup. It's like, why would you put that into bread? For me, bread is something that should be quite savoury.
Yeah.
And a legacy from school dinners, we had the most. I could do a whole podcast on school dinners. Our school dinners were horrendous. Down in Warwickshire, they closed all the school kitchens and centralised the production, and you'd get it arriving in these huge aluminium containers. And it was slop.
Yeah.
It was just, and they would force us to eat. I think it was rice pudding, and it would be congealed
Yeah, I remember there being like a pink custard thing. So I'll stop. You don't want to be having nightmares.
Well, you would have three. And I understand now as an adult why the dinner ladies were so grumpy. They'd had a skill. They'd every day, they'd had to put menus together. They'd had to prepare things. They wanted us to eat healthily and eat nice foods. That was all taken away from them, and all their job now was kind of ladling out slop. So they'd lost all the joy of their work, I think, and you could see why they were so grumpy. And it would be like you'd have a ladle of that, and then a ladle of the next thing, and you'd think, which is the main course and which is the pudding? How do you tell?
Going back to what you were saying about liking Mexican food and all those sorts, I think you've definitely travelled more. You've been more experimental, maybe, when you've been compared to. I've mainly stuck to Europe, a bit of Scandinavia and America. I haven't really. I've sort of, so I've been to countries where I don't know the language, or I know bits of the language, but I haven't gone that far afield. I haven't been. I mean, I'm sure I would like Thailand for some of the reasons you mentioned, but I've never sort of gone to sort of testing myself quite. I think you've definitely been to. I had a partner who was from Mexico City, but we never went back. We never went back to Mexico. But I did experience some Mexican food, like how do you pronounce it? Mole.
Mole, yeah.
Yeah. So I've had some and was it chimichangas and things like that? And
one of the things I had in Mexico that I really loved was ceviche, which is the and it was raw. And I'd be really nervous about making that here, but it was raw fish cooked in white vinegar with onions and peppers, and that was just delicious.
The only times I would say I would tested myself with, I have tried snails and I have tried frog's legs when I've been in France.
They're like chicken, aren't they?
Yeah, the frog's legs. The only negative thing I'd say about the frog's legs is that they were the ones I had. They had too much garlic on them. I like garlic, but all I could taste was garlic. It was like a little chicken wings and
little bits of chicken with too much garlic.
As far as snails, I think I shared a friend's portion. And they were done quite nicely. They were okay. And then in the time I've been doing the podcast, I went with one of my best friends to Lille. And one of the things that we have done before now is get friends to suggest 6 different things that we should do. And then he's quite into, I think there was a guy who used to do dice rolling to make him make decisions.
Okay.
And we've done a couple of trips. We did a trip to, when it was our 20, because we went to school together. I think it was when it was our 20th anniversary, we went to Dublin, and I think Lille might have been our 30th anniversary, and we did the dice rolling again but I was doing the podcast by then, so one of the things we rolled up was to do snails, and by then I'd already had them once, so he'd never had them, so I was able to feel like I was slightly more safer, because I had exactly the same feelings as he was having, but I was able to kind of, I know by then I'd had snails and I hadn't died, and I was able to kind of go, oh yeah, lovely snails, yum yum yum. Oh, now your turn.
You're an expert.
Yeah, I was able to be an expert and kind of sit and enjoy his pain. But I'd been in that situation just a few years before where I wasn't happy about it. But
I'm always curious with different foods. I know when I've tried Korean food, that's completely different again, isn't it? Because it's you've got brewed soya and kimchi, the kind of pickle, and it's very different from a lot of other foods. And I just think I know when I was in London, we went to an Eritrean restaurant, and I felt we had the big they do a huge bread that you get lots of little bits of meat and vegetable on, and the bread's very spongy, and that was something I hadn't had before. I found that very interesting, very different textures, and I just think there's a lot of different stuff in the world, and we should just try as much of it as we can.
Do you drink alcohol?
Not much now these days.
No. What would have been your tipple?
I tell you what, when I was in my early 20s, I really used to like real ale. But that kind of faded away, and I suppose never really a big wine drinker.
I've had different things. I didn't really start drinking that young. When we were growing up, we were always allowed to have wine on Sunday lunch, just a glass of. So when I came to the age of being able to drink, I didn't. Because I lived in a village, I didn't have any rush to kind of go to pubs. I kind of had quite a small group of friends at sixth form, and we were all kind of geeky, so nobody was leading anybody astray. So I didn't really start drinking until I went to university, and then I didn't really know what to drink. And the friends that I made at university drank cider, so I drank cider for quite a while.
Do you know, I was just about to ask you about cider, because I can remember being quite drunk on cider at quite a young age, and it makes me laugh because whenever I open Instagram, I always get that Dickens cider advert. I don't know whether you've seen it. I don't even know whether it's true. If anyone out there is Australian, is Dickens cider really a product?
Yeah, I don't know.
Watch the advert and tell me what you think. Yeah,
I like sort of gin and tonics. I probably, if I was going to say what I drink now when I have a drink, it would either be gin and tonic. I quite like in the summer the fruit ciders, like the Swedish ones, not so much the ones I used to drink when I was at university. I like Guinness. I like stouts and porters. That was like the alcoholic version of getting into the B-52s, in that I had always had really sweet alcohol, and I was sweet on somebody who drank Guinness, and so I tried Guinness because I wanted to impress them, and then I got into Guinness.
Did that work?
It worked, and I got into Guinness. The actual being sweet on the person didn't last, but I still drink Guinness 20 years later. So that was that's all because of that person. So yeah, so I kind of, but I found that once I could drink Guinness, I could then try I could try ales, or I could try or things that were more bitter. So it was a good thing to get into because
that's not a bad thing. I mean, it would have been much worse if they'd been, say, a sherry drinker or.
Yeah, I get.
Life could have been very different.
When I'm at my parents', my dad tends to come up about 5:30 with a glass of sherry, so I get good service here. Although
excellent,
my parents are the sort of people who they probably have a little bit of alcohol every day, but I've never seen them drunk.
Don't you think that's something that's kind of changed now? That I don't really drink very much anymore. I used to drink a lot more, but I certainly wouldn't drink every day.
No.
And I know sometimes I've had those public health. Honestly, the algorithms just don't work for me because, again, when I open my phone on social media, I get these "Are you drinking too much?" messages, and it's like, well, where's that come from?
Yeah.
Where have I liked some gin or some vodka or something? I don't know where you've got that from. But that whole thing about drinking every day, I think maybe that's less done now than it was maybe years ago.
I only tend to do it when I'm in Salisbury and I go to my friend Nick's house, like I've just done this weekend. Then we'll have some drink. I don't really like drinking by myself, so generally I don't. Sometimes I have something in the house in case I want to. Although I bought at Christmas, I bought some different. There was a place called like the Wild Brewery or something, and there's porters and there's ales and it was like a gift pack, and I quite liked that, but it was sitting there for ages before I tried it, and then I went away and I came back and my flatmate had drunk all of them, so I never got to try them. And I was like, they were there because I wanted them to be there. If I'd wanted that, they weren't
full.
They were happy there. They didn't need to be drunk in any rush. But I think
that's actually quite it's quite a mean thing to do, isn't it? If it's okay to say that, to drink someone else's drink and empty the bar almost.
Exactly. I like to have something. I like the idea of having a bar if I wanted to have something, or maybe it could be like a brandy brandy in a coffee or something. So I bought myself a bottle of brandy and I've hidden it in my cupboard, and it might stay there for 5 years or something before I even get around to opening it. Well, probably not 5 years, but
I know what you'd like. You'd like Gordon and Patricia Hamilton's bar.
Yeah.
Every time they walk into that lounge room, it's like, shall we have a drink? And it's like everything. Why aren't these people drunk?
Yeah. Well, I don't know if we've answered our question. We certainly know more about each other's likes and dislikes.
So
cool.
Maybe there's some things that we have got in common, but I think maybe we have got some slightly different things. But that's good. I think if everybody liked all the same stuff, then life would be quite boring, wouldn't it?
Well, also it means that if we were ever in a pub and I had loads of crisps, I would say, Andy, do you want my crisps?
Give them to me. I haven't got to even ask you, are you cheese and onion or salt and vinegar? Because it was not even not on your radar. Is it?
I probably have salt and vinegar, but
you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. I'd fight you for them.
I want your wine gum. I want your wine gums.
You can have the wine gums.
Okay. You see, we complement one another. Our differences complement one another. So that's cool as well.
But back to the original question: astrologically, are we the same person?
Yeah. We're not the same person. We're not the same person. But
some might think it. Some might think it, but we're actually not the same person, although we were born on the same day in the same country.
Yes, yeah. Andy, I suddenly realised I wanted to ask you a question. Are you at all interested in sport?
No.
No, nor am I. So another similarity. Anything at all? Any sport at all? Or
I can remember as a young child watching. Didn't there used to be like a World of Sport thing on a Saturday afternoon, and it would either be rugby or wrestling, and I can remember watching that at a young age and thinking, but never since then.
My family liked football. And, it used to be my brother and my dad liked football. My mum and I didn't. But then when I went to university, my dad wasn't working on Saturdays anymore because he was working for himself and he could choose his times more. And they started going to the football. And so my mum didn't get left behind. She went with them. So I came back and found all three of them were talking about football. Now I felt really betrayed. I got over it.
It's maybe something that's a bit obvious, but I've never really understood how sport gets so much of a profile. You turn on TV news and they have a quarter of the time dedicated to sport and the weather, and you think, okay, I get the weather. We all need to know what's going to happen. Is it going to snow? Can we turn the heating off and save a bit of money? But I've never really understood why sport has such a high profile in society, and people kind of dedicate whole times. I suppose it's recreational stuff, isn't it? And I just think for me, I'd rather be watching something or reading something or finding out about another part of the world, or to me that's more interesting.
Also, like at school, some people would make fun of you if you didn't like sport, or they'd laugh at you because perhaps in my case I was a Doctor Who fan. But people who like sport are the biggest geeks around, but it's like a geekdom that is allowed.
It's never questioned, is it?
No, but
it's never questioned.
I mean, I wouldn't travel one end of the country to another to watch a particular episode of Doctor Who. But that's what people do every week. Correct. Who go to football. They really go to the extreme.
It's almost like it's one of those things. I think like drinking. If you don't follow it and you're not interested in it, it's almost like you've got something wrong with you. Like in the same way that, if you'd asked me what my favourite illicit drug was, that would be horrendous. But if I said I didn't drink, then that's like, all right, is there a problem? And I've actually had people say to me, oh, you're really anti-drinking. I'm not anti-drinking. I can take it or leave it. And I can leave it for months.
I had a brief phase where I went to football, but only because I moved to Camberley to start a new job, and they met my friend Callum, who became my flatmate for years. And I was a bit lonely and I didn't have any other friends, so I used to go with him to his football team. But really, I was only going because I liked the burgers, and I also went horse racing with him. The horse racing was a bit more fun because you see the animals in the paddock, and you could people watch, and maybe there'd be a member of the royal family who'd wander past, or you could have a drink, and it could be quite fun. And occasionally you might even win something. But my interest sort of waned. But it was something. It was more of a social thing, something to do with him, and I particularly with the football, I couldn't get that level of excitement of the sort of shouting and cheering, and I didn't feel that. I didn't feel excited. I didn't even feel necessarily that excited with the horses. With the horses, when your horse was, I could perhaps get a little bit more into that, but not with the football. I just didn't have the emotional connection with. It wasn't important enough. I don't sit watching Doctor Who and do the sort of Doctor Who. I don't. It's just I don't know.
So I don't know whether this counts, but the only sport I've watched in recent years where I've thought, actually I could carry on watching this, darts. Now, for some reason, darts. I can sit and watch that, and I can think, are they going to get it? And because it's some of it's skill, but at the end of the day, some of it's random. It's like what the score is, and I know what you mean about that kind of geekiness about, because there'll be people watching darts who'll know instantly that a treble 18 is the winning score, and they'll know that. And I suppose those people who do the kind of score people, they kind of know that in their mind, don't they? That you need a treble 12 and a treble, But so that's kind of like the geeky side of it. But I think darts is a bit less. I don't know. I just think it's a bit more relaxed, maybe.
I like cycling, but not in a sporty way. I used to cycle living in a village. Having a bike was a practical thing, getting about and going exploring, but it was never about. It was exercise, but I would never be thinking, "Oh, I'm going on a cycle ride because I'm going for exercise." My dad plays golf, and although he stopped playing it at about age of 84. Only just stopped playing it, but I often remember that there's a quote. I can't remember who said it, but that golf is a good walk spoiled, which I agree with.
It was oh gosh, famous American author, wasn't it? Is it Mark Twain said it?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I kind of agree with that. I like walking, but what?
So just to prove that we're not the same person, you liked cycling. I've got to confess, I can't ride a bike.
No.
How have I got to be this age and I can't ride a bike? I can't do it, Paul. I can't physically stay on it. I have fear that I'm going to fall off. I just can't do it.
I've stopped riding one now, probably for that reason. I don't think I would be safe on one now, but I did have one, and I did use it a lot when I was a teenager. But can you swim?
I can swim.
We can swim. Yeah, I can swim too.
I can swim. But
that's another thing. I used to. I was in the Cub Scouts and I hated it, partly because when I was in Cub Scouts, it was when Doctor Who was on during the week, and I would be in danger of missing an episode if I went to Cubs. And also, it was all like Boise and too sociable. And
what I would say to that is one of my issues with swimming is that's less enjoyable when you get to the swimming baths. You've got those professional swimmers that are there, and they're in that straight line, and it's like, and you just think, oh, I'm in your way, and I just feel like I'm not that good at. Okay, I can swim. I could swim enough to save my life, but I'm certainly not that kind of professional up and down in rows.
No, well, that's what I was going to say. Now you reminded me. I did swimming with Cubs, and it was all that. Just go one end, swim. I like to splash around or swim underwater, pretend I'm a sea otter or something. And I also remember connected with Doctor Who again was that there was a particular episode around the time that Peter Davison was the Doctor where they'd been on an underwater base with the Sea Devils, and there was bits where the Doctor had been drowned. Was he drowned and all that sort of a cliffhanger like that? So in my head, I was playing Doctor Who. To make it more interesting, I was in my head. I was playing that I was in Doctor Who, now I have to go and jump in the water because like Sea Devils are after me or something. I don't know if it was visible. I don't know if somebody had been watching me, they would have thought, well, that boy's doing something a bit strange.
What's going on?
Or whether it was just in my head and I was very subtle about it. I can't remember now. But I have to make boring things as more interesting if possible. But
did I spy you were getting a drink brought to you then?
Yeah, I've got coffee now. Yeah.
Oh, so one of maybe another final question before we finish: coffee or tea? Did we mention that already?
No, we haven't. We talked about tea, but not as a preference.
Coffee or tea then?
Probably coffee. But certainly when I'm at my parents', but they don't have fancy coffee. It's granules or it's tea. But I have more coffee here than I have tea, but I do love tea. But I really do like coffee. Is it the other way around?
So maybe it's a bit of a you'll have them both, but
yes, I will have them both. Yeah.
So with coffee, I can only drink proper coffee. I can't stand instant. Yeah. But for me, it's tea. I would much rather drink tea every time. A good cup of strong tea, and I have to leave the tea bag in, and hardly any milk, and it has to be. Is it builder's tea?
Yeah,
is that what they call it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because Mum and Dad both have sugar in their tea. I can't put sugar in tea. You can't taste anything other than the sugar. For
Paul, that's like dipping your crisps in chocolate or jam.
Yeah, or like I had at my friend's party last night, where I had Stilton on one part of the plate and jelly babies on another part of the plate and chutney on another part of the plate, and they slowly migrated to the middle. So my last few jelly babies were covered in Stilton and chutney, which is an interesting combination, but not one I want to repeat.
You've actually made me think for kind of future party. Cubes of Stilton with a jelly baby and an onion on a cocktail stick.
You could try it. I mean, I haven't died, not yet. I got through it, I think. But anyway,
very good.
Well, it's been fun finding out more about you and sharing it with the listeners. And
I've loved it.
We've got loads of other things we want to talk about. So, listeners, Andy will be back, and we'll talk to him again soon. And thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me back, Paul. I've thoroughly enjoyed it again. It's flown. I can't believe we've done nearly 3. Yeah.
Yeah, for 5 hours. We've been talking for 5 hours. It's a long episode.
We started on Sunday and it's now actually Tuesday.
Yeah. Okie dokie. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.
Well, listeners, that's about all we've got time for. So we've learnt quite a lot, I think, about Andy, about our likes and dislikes, and about our similarities and our differences. And we're not the same person. No, absolutely we're not. Yes, I'll see that now, Paul. Oh, dear. Why do you have to keep bringing it up? I'm sorry, Yeti Uncle John. Just you do say some ridiculous things. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, listeners, that's all we've got time for. Andy will be back again another day. We'll be back sooner, and we've got plenty of episodes in the can. So, yeah, join us again soon. And, okay, bye-bye for now. Okay, bye now. Bye-bye. I'm terribly sorry, Paul. I feel I'm to blame for, some of the silly things that Yeti Uncle John said today. Why? What did you say? Well, I was joking. I mentioned the clone thing. And, yes, Yeti Uncle John rather embraced it. He was rather excited about the idea. He seemed to think there might be some government conspiracy where you were cloned from one another, or cloned, well, anyway. But we're quite clearly not the same person. Thank you for explaining, but no, Yeti Uncle John jumped to this conclusion all of his own because he is Yeti Uncle John. Yes. Well, I see that. But anyway, it was nice to have Andy back. Yeah, it certainly was. It's always nice to talk with Andy, and it's nice that we can do podcasting together because it means we get to talk more and that we get to know each other better. And it's very, very cool to have a birthday twin. That's all I can say. But yes. And even nicer that my birthday twin can be on my podcast. Yes, Paul. Even my real brother only appears very occasionally. My birthday twin has been on twice in the same year. Yes, Paul. Oh dear. Don't start some family arguments. No, I'm not trying to, but I'm just making a point. Maybe birthday twins have even more bonds than an actual brother or sister. But it is very special. It is. Anyway, I can hear the theme music, so I should stop waffling. Okay, I promise I'll try and explain to Yeti Uncle John if he gets confused again. Thanks, Cromitty. Thank you very much. Oh dear, that Yeti Uncle John. Oh dear, yes, he is quite something. Oh, he is. He really is.
I gotta go now! Bye!
I want to go with you!
Gotta go! Bye!
Goodbye.
It's been good, but yeah, definitely time to come home now.
Wow. Really? No kidding.
Goodbye. Goodbye.
This show is part of the Pride 48 network. Find more shows over at pride48.com.
Oh dear. What's going on now? Oh, it's the Shy Life Podcast. Let's go.
I have a voice.
I have a voice.
You have a voice.
You have a voice.
We have a voice.
We have a voice.
Unique voices in podcasting.
UnivazPods.net.
Paul, I feel bad. I feel stupid. It was because you are bad and stupid, yes, Uncle John. Oh, charming. I'm teasing. Well, you're not bad, but I'm stupid. A little bit. Oh, dear. Look, Paul, I was going to make you an offer. I thought it would be nice. I thought that you and Andy, you might like to have some birthday twin merchandise. Oh, gosh. I can see where this is going. No, this is high-quality merchandise, Paul. None of those T-shirts where the paint's still wet. No, I've got these done special. You've got them done. You've got them made already. That's no pressure then. No, I mean, I know you and Andy, you know, you're the only people who would want birthday twin merch, but I thought you were guaranteed to want to purchase them. Well, what have you done? There's a biro, one of them ones with, where the picture, the top of the pen is translucent, and the picture slides. Yeah, it starts off with Andy at the top because he's like the superior of the twins, and then as you turn it, then he vanishes and you appear as the lesser twin. Well, thanks, Skitty Uncle John. Oh, yeah, I thought you'd like that. And what colour ink? What colour what? Well, what colour ink is the biro? Oh, I think it might be translucent. Oh, so perfect for writing invisible messages then. Yeah, couldn't get blue or black, too expensive. So, it's translucent. Yeah, you can look at it with an IV lamp thing. Sounds perfect. What else? A mug. There's a face on it, and then you pour hot water into the cup and the face changes. Okay, so whose face is on the mug when it's cold? Well, you, of course, because, you know, it's, there you are. Just there on the mug, I can see. And then if I pour hot water on, your face will change and Andy's face will appear because things are hotting up when birthday twin shows up, you know, as the superior twin. What is all this superior twin business? I mean, we are birthday twins. We're both of equal importance. Yeah, well, actually, that's your opinion, Paul. It's my opinion. Thanks. Any other merchandise? Well, I could have done a T-shirt, but I thought, well, with your fluctuating weight, Paul, would you have fitted into a T-shirt? I can fit into T-shirts. I can, yes. But I don't think I want one of your T-shirts. They've got such a bad reputation. Well, the last one I made, the paint didn't run. So I am improving. Well, the paint didn't run, but the dye of the T-shirt kind of went into the skin of the person wearing the T-shirt. So they were like green. Their skin was green. But the actual design, it didn't smudge or nothing. Sounds like you've got quite a lot of work to do with your T-shirts, Yeti Uncle John. So you're going to buy some merchandise. I'll have a word with Andy. He might like a mug with his face on, or maybe a pen that makes him appear. I don't know. What about you, Paul? I'll think about it. But we've made these things. If you don't buy them, you'll get them as a birthday gift in your forthcoming big birthday. Well, then maybe I should just wait until then, you know. But I was hoping for a quick turnaround of profit, Paul. Yeti Uncle John, it's time to finish the episode. Please go away. I have things to do. Oh, all right. Well, you'll think about the merchandising. I will. I'll think about the merchandising. I'll also think about other ideas for merchandising, and then I'll make them myself on Redbubble. Oh, who's advertising now? I'm the official merchandising person on this show, you know. So you keep telling me. Please go away now. Oh dear, this is quite a hostile environment. I'm leaving. That's probably a great idea. Andy, I'm very sorry if you're listening. This is what I get all the time with Yeti Uncle John. I'm right here, Paul. I can hear exactly what you're saying. Yeah, no, I know you can. That's why I'm saying it. So maybe you learn. Oh, I won't learn. I will not learn. You're very certain of that, aren't you? Very certain, Paul. But I am going. Good, go. Thanks, Andy. Thanks for being my guest. Do apologise. Don't apologise for me. I already have. Right. Got to go now, listeners. I've got to have a lie down, I think. A very, very long lie down. Oh, dear. I'm just not appreciated on my own show. It's not your show. Sorry, listeners. Bye for now.
I don't know, but sometimes this show is really weird.
Oh yeah, that's perfectly normal on the Satellite Podcast. Perfectly normal.
Oh, kitty Dee. Kitty. Oh, I love Dee.
Time's nearly up.
Thanks, Joe.
629.
I think we've only got two minutes.
Yeah. Should we go out and come back once more? We don't have to do the 440. We can just do it until we.
Okay.
Perhaps we'll do bit of food, and then we can sort of say goodbye.
All right then.
I just it'd just been nice to say once we finish recording, say goodbye rather than we've got to go now. Bye. So if we just start another call, at least we can end on our own terms,
Definitely.
not forced. So we'll end it now, and then we'll come back. Do you need
see you in a minute?
Do you need more tea?
No, in fact, I've still got half a cup left of this one, and it's still quite warm. So I think maybe the time people sucked a bit of time out in that one.
Yeah, I think so.
I can't believe that's been 40 minutes.
I know.
I could eat my body weight in crisps every day.